about the journal, which is titled Medieval Women's Early Involvement in Manuscript Production, suggested by Lapis Lazuli Identification in Dental Calculus. This was published in the year 2019 in the journal named Science Advances, of which the journal's impact factor was 14.1, and the terminologies are Lapis Lazuli, which is nothing but ultramarine blue pigment mined exclusively in Afghanistan. It is a very rare or expensive in medieval Europe, and dental calculus, as we all know, it is nothing but a mineralized cloud preserving micro debris. And micro-Raman spectroscopy is a laser-based technique to identify the material composition, and the osculation is the ritual kissing of religious index, potentially transferring the pigments. So the novelty of the study is this is first direct evidence of lapis lazuli used by a medieval women, which happened in the 11th to 12th century in Germany. So the challenges or assumptions that are that ultramarine was restricted to male scribes, and women monasteries were marginal in luxury book production. So it also had this methodological innovation where dental calculus was used as a biomarker for craft activities. So the aim and objective of the study was to investigate the presence of lapis lazuli in a medieval women's dental calculus to reconstruct the role in manuscript production. And the objective was to identify the blue particles using microscopy, Sandelius or Raman spectroscopy methods. So to compare the reference pigments to confirm lapis lazuli pigments, and evaluate 4 scenarios for pigment incorporation, that is scribal work, pigment preparation, medicine, or devotional oscillation. So the materials and methodology involves the sample selection and context. So individual B78, that is middle-aged women who could be of 45 to 60 years from a Dacian women's monastery from Germany in 11th to 12th century AD was specimen taken into account, and the radiocarbon dated to AD 997 to 116, so that is over 95% confirmation, upper class confirmation was taken, and the osteological profile showed no signs of hard labor, heavy anterior dental calculus was seen. So archaeological context said the monastery was destroyed by fire and very few historical records survive. So the pigment isolation protocol, this was the pigment isolation protocol. Initial attempt was made to decalcify the teeth, which was rejected due to the pigment degradation. So it was then optimized using surface decontamination. So needle was needle cleaning under stereo microscope with 0.6 ml of HCl was done, and sonification was done for 6 minutes in ultra pure water to release particles without chemical alteration. And microscopy, that is greater than 100 blue particles were identified, and it was consistent with the Lapis lazuli standards. So analytical techniques like STM EDS were used, and the key finding was that the absence of copper or ferrum was excluded. Azurite, esmalt, and limonite was found. So the match was major elements like aluminium, silicon, and sulfur. It aligned with lazurite. So this is the chemical composition of the pigment. And the micro-Raman spectroscopy results revealed that diagnostic peaks were seen at 548 centimeters in SV symmetric stretch, and 258 centimeter we confirmed lazurite. So the flow globite reduction was also done, and it was the peaks were seen, and it had iron-rich variant which was linked to the particles to Afghan lapis. So these are the pictures. So this is the Dalham Church of Saint Peter and the Women's Monastery. The architectural pattern, the plan, and schematic view of the burial location of the cemetery. And this was the blue particle which was observed embedded with the archaeological dental calculus. So that was the Lapis lazuli from the B78 model, and this shows the elemental composition of the archaeological blue particle and the pigments which were seen. So it was all related. And then this indicates the confirmation of lazulite mineral using microgrammetry spectroscopy, and this confirms the presence of phyllosilicate fluoroglobite material which was found adjacent to lazulite particles, and the peaks can be seen here. So the controls and validation was done using the archaeological and Lapis Lazuli, azurite and esmaltlimonite. So the particles were analyzed across multiple calculus fragments to rule out contamination. Statistical analysis was done. The particle size distribution was estimated. The mean diameter was found out, and the spatial distribution was also found. And they found that the particles dispersed across calculus fragments, and there was repeated exposure. No clumping was seen, unlikely to result from single devotional auscultation event. And limitations in analysis where there was no inferential stars, descriptive statistics only was there, and no p-values for multivariate tests were there, and the sample size was only one. It was just one individual and cannot assess the population-wide trends. The results revealed that there was a pigment identified. The pigment was lazulite plus fluoroglobite, which was unambiguous Lapis Lazuli signature. So the exclusion of alternatives, it ruled out the other blue pigments. Behavior inference stated that there was a likely brush leaking during painting, which scattered the distribution. It's opposed to habitual activity. So historical corroboration was also there. Contemporaries letters like the letters which attest to the female scribes using luxury pigments were evident, and the dietary context it stated that there was no plant micro remains suggesting pigment ingestion as medicine from the calculus composition. So the isotypes were not analyzed here, but prior work on the same individual, it showed no dietary anomalies. Moving on to the discussion. So the scenario evaluated, which was done by plausibility, is said to that the scribe or the illuminator which was used, the material which was used was much likely, was evident in the historical records, which is seen in the German historical books. And the particle size, the particle physics was also, it matched the brush making, and pigment preparation was not evident of the lapis grinding workshops at Calcutta. So it also related to the late medieval text. It suggested pigment prep was gendered, it was male dominated, and laboratory medicine, which is unlikely. So no medical text from Germany during that period was found, and devotional oscillation was also evident. So immortal casing of manuscripts emerged only in the 14th century. And the strength of the study is it is a multidisciplinary study. It combines the archaeological chemistry and art history. So rigorous controls were one of the strengths. So it avoided acid declassification, which was used in multiple stereo microscopic studies. And historical context is that it integrates the radiocarbon dating with the monastic records. The limitation is that we know that it is only done in a single individual and it cannot generalize to all female scribes. And based on taphonomy, a potential pigment can be degraded over time. And scenario uncertainty is where we cannot definitely prove that B76 was a scribe. And future direction is that analysis of calculus from other monastic sites can be done to assess the privilege, and combine this study with metagenomics to study oral microbiome of the scribes, and investigate geochemical sourcing of lapis to trace the trade routes. To conclude the study concluded that women were artists, and the woman B76 individual was in a monastery, and they used ultramarine contradicting assumptions of a male-dominated luxury book production. And even small women communities, they had access to global trade networks. So as this lapis was actually from Afghanistan, but this was seen in German. So So dental calculus, as said, it emerged as a new tool to identify the invisible labor in archaeology. So the sonication protocol preserves the sensitive micro remains, and geochemical sourcing was done to trace the lapis to specific Afghan mines, and analyze the calculus from mere scribes or monks for gender patterns was also done. So the implication is that women in small monasteries, they participated in high status artistic production, but they had all access to trade networks from Germany to Afghan. That is an indicator of commercial expansion. And calculus it also concluded that calculus can preserve craft biomarkers, which is invisible in artifacts or tests in the modern days. So the bottom line is this study pioneers a biomolecular approach to art history, revealing marginalized contributions to medieval cultural production. It also emphasizes the need to re-examine archaeological invisibility through cutting-edge science. This checklist, this study adapted both the scope and tripod guidelines, since it was observational as well as an evolutionary study. The study design was clear and there was no adequate sample size because only single skeleton was taken into account. The methods variables were all detailed and explained well. The statistical analysis did not have the p-values. The quantitative analysis was not well done. The results were all tabulated properly and the interpretation was all evaluated with 4 scenarios. Reproducibility was very well detailed. Ethics and impact was also good. Thank you.